Dr. Akim Omokanye. Excuse me. We've got a bit of Zoom how-to and little housekeeping before we get going. This meeting is being recorded, so that recording will probably be up February 28th or March 1st, somewhere in there. And then we'll go from there. Because it is being recorded, we just ask that through the presentation and stuff, you keep yourself muted. And that's just so that the recording audio is nice. Once we get to the Q&A, you're welcome to unmute yourself, ask questions, have a bit of a chat, all that good stuff. And you can find all that down at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Also, through the presentation, feel free to use the chat. Katie and myself will be down in there. We'll be keeping track of questions and all that. So feel free to have a chat. Say hi, say where you're from in there. That would be awesome. And if you're worried about your questions getting buried, feel free to send a message directly to myself or Katie, and we will ask them of Akim once we get to the end of the presentation. So a little bit about PCBFA before we get rolling. PCBFA is a charitable applied research and extension group. We were founded by producers in 1982, and we serve 10 municipalities up here in Northern Alberta. We do producer-led research directed by our board of 10 local producers. And we also do extension and do our best to provide practical, reliable information to the producers up here. So our research is all producer-led. It's small plot trials in Fairview, as well as on some satellite research sites. And we also do some larger scale on-farm trials. We also do events and webinars. We have our monthly newsletter. We have our bi-weekly podcast, which the next episode of that will be going up on the 22nd next week. And then we've got, we also provide production advice and expertise. So if any of that's interesting, you want to check out our research, you want to listen to our podcast, that can all be found at peacecountrybeef.ca. And all this contact information is there too. So yeah, tonight we're having Dr. Akim talk about some pasture mixes and perennial crops. Akim is PCBFA's research coordinator. He's also a forage livestock research agronomist, and he's responsible for planning and executing all of our research projects and demonstrations and making those findings available for producers. He's really passionate about sharing his research findings, and that's what he's going to do tonight. So with that, Akim, you should be able to share your screen and we can get going.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna and Katie. And thanks everyone for coming to this Zoom meeting. I hope you all had, good drives. The roads, hopefully the roads were not too bad for you on your way to this Zoom. So we'll see how it goes. Can you see my screen now? All right.
We can.
It's all good. Okay. Okay. Thanks again, everyone, for coming to this Zoom meeting. So in this presentation, we'll be taking a look at various forage species and how to select the right forage species for hay and pasture. We're going to be looking at several forage mixes. A few are actually available, more than a few are available on the market, and we've tested several ones, here in small plots as well as on farm at field scale level. So we're going to be looking at some of them. A few perennial forage selection and forage seeding rate calculation tools are available online to kind of help producers create forage mixes. I will briefly show you these tools and where they can be found. For producers who are interested in creating their cover crop cocktail mixtures, we use 3 different methods for creating cocktails. So I will take you through these methods, and then I will also be sharing a few PCBFA trials in the Peace Country region. Yeah, so we all know that forage establishment, it's a long-term investment that requires, careful planning, land preparation, species selection, and then, of course, management in order to ensure that we have a successful establishment and then a forage stand that can last us for several years. The fact sheets on perennial forage establishment in Alberta, as well as the Alberta Forage Manual, both are produced by Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, and they both contain useful information. These are available online. The fact sheet on perennial forage establishment in Alberta actually talks a lot about choosing the right species, how you can prepare your bed, the preferred time of seeding. If you're thinking about late or spring, it's talked about both. Then fertility during establishment, how seeds can be placed to ensure good germination and better establishment. Also, it talks about using companion crops along with your perennial forages, particularly at establishment. It also talks about seeding rates, seeding systems, as well as how you can, manage weeds, particularly, in the year of establishment. So, but in this presentation, I won't be talking much about forage establishment. I'm going to be talking a bit about choosing the right forage species, as well as if you are interested in using companion crops and forage production systems. This slide shows a list of perennial forage grasses. Some perennial forage grasses are better suited to hay production than for use in pasture programs. So it is important to identify the end use of the forage crops that you intend to include in whatever mixtures you want to create for hay or pasture. So these tables shows you a list of different grasses. Some of them can be used for both grazing and store feed, particularly, meadow brome grass, hybrid brome grass, tall fescue, and orchard grass. These are all good candidates for both hay and pastures. I've also included Festilolium. Festilolium is a cross between Italian and perennial ryegrass and tall or meadow fescue. It is important to know that, by crossing the fescue and ryegrass, those available varieties of Festilolium are actually able to combine the fescue winter hardiness and drought tolerance. And then, of course, we all know that ryegrasses are palatable. So the Festilolium varieties are also able to combine, that palatability, attribute of ryegrasses. So please know that Festilolium varieties can only last for 2 to 4 years in the field, as they have shorter lifespan than most of the available perennial grasses. So this table shows perennial forage legumes and what they can be used for. With the exception of sisal milkveg, sainfoin, and birdsfoot trefoil, all the perennial legumes listed here actually can cause bloats. Sisal milkveg, sainfoin, and birdsfoot trefoil are non-bloating legumes. And so several varieties of these non-bloating legumes are actually available on the market. There's Velt's sisal milkveg, there's Glenview and Mountain View sainfoin, and then there's other several varieties as well for birdsfoot trefoil. The only thing is that sisal milkveg and birdsfoot trefoil can actually be difficult to establish. But for some reason, we've always had some good success establishing these two types of forage legumes, out here in Fairview at our research park. If you're thinking about creating your perennial forage mixtures, one of the tools that can be used is the forage species selection tool. This is actually available on the Peace Forage Association of BC's website. This is a very useful tool for the Peace region. The tools contains 47 different species in the database. The seed mixtures calculator will actually enable you to select, the preferred forage species, whatever species you have in mind to seed. You can indicate the seeding rate and then the percent of each species that you intend to include in your mixture. You can also indicate the number of acres to be seeded before you actually run the calculator. The forage selection tool also has information on precipitation range, particularly for grasses and legume species, for the Peace region. It also has information on drought and flooding tolerance of forage species. You can also find out about the Peace region suitability, of the different forages that are available. If you're talking about grasses or legumes, so you will have an indication as to how suitable, these different forages are in the Peace region. Winter hardiness, it's very important when selecting perennial forages. And so these tools also provides you with ratings, particularly on winter hardiness of grasses and legumes. Another important tool that is available to create a perennial forage mixtures is the Forage UP, which is available on the BCRC website. This is relatively new, so it allows producers in Western Canada, to be able to create their own forage mix. So it is designed to provide accurate seeding rates, weed management, something that is similar to the one I talked about in the last slide. So since this tool is for Western Canada, you can actually choose your province, if you know your soil type and the region, and this will help you to list the forage species that are suited, particularly for the zone that is being selected. So this tool is also mobile friendly. You can download it on your mobile and then input whatever you need and then save it and then later on print it. Yeah, so another one that producers can use, this is more of an older forage mixture calculator. This is available on Alberta Agriculture and Forestry website. This is similar to the other tools in some areas, but not as detailed, as the previous two tools. For this calculator, you will need to enter the area of land to be seeded, just like in the previous ones. Choose a seeding method if you want to broadcast or if you want to use a drill. If you want to use a drill, it has a provision for you to select the row spacing on your drill. Then you can select the percent of mixtures you want to include in the mixture. And then you can also indicate the seeding rate for the different types of forage species you have in the mixture. After that, then you can run the calculator and then it will create a forage mixture and also estimate seed density, for the drills that you have indicated, particularly going by the row spacing. When creating your forage mixtures, it is important to take into consideration, if you will be using coated seed or uncoated seeds. It is advisable for you to actually increase the seeding rate by 20 to 25% to factor in the weight of coated seeds so that you can meet the target seeding population or weight, on an acre basis. If you're using uncoated seed, there's no need to increase the seeding rate, of course, except if the germination is not that good. So importantly, it is also good to ask for the germination percentage from the seed company. You need to use this in those tools that I did talk about. This will help you to calculate the appropriate, target plant stand per acre or per square foot. Spring seeding is ideal for forages. I know some producers do plan to seed in late fall, but if you're planning to seed in late fall, so it is always better to increase your seeding rate. And so increasing the seeding rate can even be up to 20%. If you have fields that are challenging, so it's also good to increase the seeding rate for such fields by as much as 20%. If a seed mixture is to be broadcast seeded, again, it is also important for you to increase the seeding rate by up to 20%. At times, I even talk to producers, to increase that, up to about 30%. For very fine stem alfalfa hay fields, for instance, Siberian type alfalfa, which is annick or yellow blossom alfalfa. So yellow head alfalfa, the suggestion is to increase the seeding rate by as much as 30 to 50%. In addition to creating a suitable forage mixture for a particular field, it is also important to know your soil group. For us in the Peace region, our soil group is the dark gray or the Peace River soil. We advise that you carry out a soil test before any seedling establishments. This will help you to correct for soil for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium before seeding. PCBFA can always help you to send soil samples, to the lab for soil health indicators as well if you want. That will give you an idea as to how good your soil is in terms of soil aggregate stability, soil organic matter, and if you even want some information on the soil carbon stock before a new forage establishment. So like I said, after a soil test, it is important to balance, based on the reports that you receive from the lab, balance for fertility or fertilizer application. The amount of fertilizer needed will actually depend on the number of legumes or the percentage of legumes in the mixes. The more legumes we have in the mixes, the less nitrogen you need to apply, during establishment. On the other hand, when you have more legumes, then you need more phosphorus. Based on hundreds of soil fertility tests, that PCBFA has been able to carry out, across the piece, particularly from 2009 to date, we have strong evidence to show that, the Peace country soils are mostly adequate, in potassium for perennial forage stand establishment. And so forage production for several years, in the Peace don't actually need, phosphorus, external phosphorus application. So our soils are pretty much good, in potassium. So I don't see a need for potassium application, particularly during establishment. In general, we may need to apply up to 20 pounds of sulfur, to a new forage stand. Again, if you're considering using a perennial forage mixture with companion crops, particularly, producers have talked to me about oats, barley, or if you're thinking about using triticale or soft white wheat, or even a combination of some of these annual crops for green feed, or it could be for silage in the establishment here of the perennial forage mixture. It is better to use less, annual forage crops such as triticale, soft white wheat, or barley, in the mixtures. So we recommend that you use less than 50% of whatever crops you want to use as a companion crop. So oat is very competitive. So, it's always better to use an early maturing oat varieties. SO1 oat is one of such. NASA oat is another good variety, that are always earlier maturing than most of the other oat varieties that are available. Producers have talked to me about, making up some, recommendations for the use of companion crops. So I have recently recommended to producers to use, say, 1.3 bushels of barley per acre, 1.4 of oats, or a mixture of barley and oats, in which each crop is seeded at 0.7 bushels per acre. These calculations actually, were based on the seeding rate of 300 seeds per square meter or 28 seeds per square foot for barley and oats. And that is what we use for our regional silage variety trials for grain feed or for silage production. It is important to seed the perennial mixture and companion crop as early as possible. And then in order to reduce the competitive nature of the oats or the barley, we advise that the nitrogen application to such companion crop should be reduced. Another important thing to do is to harvest the companion crop at the right silage or grain feed stage. I'm going to show you some of the stages that we use for grain feed or silage when it comes to harvesting annual crops much later. So this will open up the canopy and provide more time for the perennial seedlings to recover before the hard frost hits us in late August or sometime in early September. So that's the essence of you having to cut the companion crops at the right stage for silage or for grain feed. If you're thinking of a perennial seeding rate that is going to be suitable for whatever you need to seed, this slide shows you where you can get a good seeding rate guide. Both the Perennial Forage Establishment, in Alberta, is available on the website, has got a list, of the different forage species that are available in Western Canada, and then there are various seeding rates, and then also looking at different row spacings as well as plant, stands per square foot. Also, the UPIC is actually even got a more detailed, list of seeding rate tables in Excel spreadsheet with some suggestions as to if you need to increase, your seeding rates based on the number of mixtures you have, in your seed. Yeah, so I like to talk about high legume pastures a lot. I know, there's the fear of cows bloating on high legume pastures, particularly, high legume pastures that are alfalfa dominated, but including non-bloating legumes, particularly something like sainfoin, salsa milk veg, and birdsfoot trefoil in alfalfa mix can actually help us to reduce the incidence of bloats. In Western Canada, in Lethbridge in particular, and then in Saskatchewan, studies have shown that 50% or more of sainfoin in an alfalfa mixture can reduce or eliminate completely, the risk of bloat, pasture bloat. So it's important, if you have to have a high legume pasture, to include some non-bloating legumes like sainfoin, salsa milk veg, and then birdsfoot trefoil. Data from Alberta Agriculture and Forestry showed that up to 92%, more profit per acre from grass and legume pasture, compared to tame grass alone. So, and this is one of the reasons why I like to promote high legume pasture. And also the same data did indicate that using a high pasture legume, a high legume pasture can help you to increase your grazing days by as much as even up to about 60% compared to just grass alone. In addition to being able to increase the number of grazing days, being able to increase forage production, and also being able to get more profit per acre, there's increase in animal gain per acre, and then cows are able to have a good body condition scores, and of course better conception rates has also been reported. And this like I said, are the reasons why I like to promote high legume pastures to producers. So this slide shows a few forage mixes that I suggest from time to time to producers in the piece. PCBFA has tested most of these in small plots and even on farm, under a field scale condition. So these mixtures are available on the market, under the respective names that I've indicated. I've got Cattleman's, A-Grace, Pasture Pro, Legume Master, Lowlands, and then Osman. Osman is because a few producers have asked me about a good forage mixes for horses, and because of that, we decided to include a few of the forage mixtures for oxes. But this one in particular, has shown some good promise for us. Yeah, so now let's talk about annual cover crops and their mixtures. There are 5 categories of cover crops that you can select from for intercropping or for cover crop cocktails. The first one is cool season grasses, and that's where you have barley, wheat, oats, rye, and triticale. And then we have cool season legumes. This is where we have forage peas, hairy veg, annual clovers, and then we have broadleaves, which can be subdivided into 2. We have forage brassicas, which consist of rape, kale, turnips, radish, and then forage crosses like Winfred and Vivian. And then we also have forage forbs or herbs, and this include buckwheat. Buckwheat is a fast, growing crop. Within a very short time after it's been seeded, 2-3 weeks, what you see out in the field, you'll be surprised. Very fast growing, and that's why it's really good, for controlling weeds. Then we have Phacelia under forbs or annual herbs as well. Phacelia is a very good pollinator. We have chicory, and then we have plantain. We also have sunflower. Plantain and chicory are kind of, perennials, which we have not been able to pay much attention to in terms of research. But late in the fall, my observation is you see plantain still remaining very green, late in the fall than any of these cover crop cocktails that we have tested, for some years now. Then we have warm season grasses. This includes proso millet, German millet, Siberian millet, and pale millet. And then we also have sorghum Sudan grass. Then we have grain sorghum and forage sorghum. The reason why I have this written in red is that I'm not a fan of including warm season crops in cocktail mixtures, just because they start very slowly, and then by the time they germinate, most of the time it's not easy for them to catch up with the cool season crops that will have germinated much earlier. But if you are thinking about including a few of these warm season grasses in your cocktails, yeah, proso millet, German millet, and Siberian millet are good. Sorghum Sudan grass is also okay. All these warm season crops, if you have to see them by themselves as monocrops, when you do when you carry out a good weed control measure, you'll be amazed by what you see, particularly sorghum Sudan grass. Sorghum Sudan grass, from our experience, in a good year, you can get up to 10 to 11,000 pounds, to the acre in terms of forage grammata use. Then we also have warm season legumes as soybean, fenugreek, cowpea, and mung bean. I don't recommend cowpea and mung bean to be included in cocktails at all. You'll be lucky if you can get a few cowpea, stands, in 1 out of maybe 3 or 4 years, of testing it in the piece. So it's not something I really recommend in the piece. Yeah, so annual cover crops mixtures, if you're talking about intercropping or if you're talking about cocktail mixtures, can actually be used for different things. It can be, they can be used for sward grazing. They can be used for green feed. The only problem is for green feed, I always caution producers to be very careful. I don't advise that you include crops such as forage brassicas, forbs, Phacelia, soybeans, sorghum Sudan grass in your mixes, just because your crops wouldn't be easy to dry down before you peel. So I don't always advise that you include these types of crops in your mixes for green feed. So for green feed, I prefer just simple mixtures, particularly intercropping, maybe 2 crops or just 3 crops. The 3 crops could be oat, barley, and forage peas, and that's going to be good for you to have a good dry down. Then cocktail mixtures or intercropping can also be used for silage, baleage, annual pasture, and then even intercropping with corn. Yeah, so let's look at intercropping systems. So intercropping systems can be divided into 2. The first one is where you have 2 crops. So I give you an example of oats and forage peas here. So where you have oats and forage peas, we recommend that the peas in the mixture should be seeded at 75% of the normal pea seeding rate. And for the cereal in the mixture, we've always used 50% of the normal seeding rate for the cereals. So the cereals, so I'm talking about oat, barley, triticale, or soft white wheat. And then in a situation where you have just cereals mixes, for instance, looking at spring or winter cereals, we have always recommended that you use 75% of normal seeding rate of each crop in the mixes. So you may want to consider, say, rye being mixed with barley, or winter triticale being mixed with oats, or even barley. Another intercropping systems that we have tested is 3 crops, being mixed together. So an example here is peas, barley, and triticale. Another example is peas, barley, and faba beans. Normally, what we do is to use 33% of normal seeding rates of each of the crop in the mixture. Now, we talked about mixing 2 or 3 crops in the previous slide. So if you have 4 or more crops, so that becomes a cocktails. So that can be up to 9, even greater than 9 crops in a mixture. So a cocktail can be selected from a diversity of plant families. And so I did talk about the different cover crop groups earlier on. We are talking about cool season grasses, cool season legumes, warm season grasses, warm season legumes, and non-legumes, particularly brassicas and forbs. So a cocktail mixture, can be made up of different plant family groups. So the different plant family groups, will normally correspond to different functional groups. Some of them, are good at fixing nitrogen, particularly the legumes. And then some of them, like the annual ryegrass, Italian ryegrass, are good at improving soil structure. And then when you talk about improving soil compaction, some of the brassicas are really good at that. Then the brassicas as well can also help us to improve forage quality for livestock production. Now let's look at different ways by which a producer can create, a cocktail mix, on his farm. So there are 3 different methods that I use, and then also take producers through. So the first one is by number of seeds per square foot. You can have up to 1.6 million of seeds per acre, or about 37 seeds per square foot. And then the second method is by percent of normal monoculture seeding rates. Then the third one is by number of species in the mixture. We also call that, an equal amounts method. Of course, there are several commercial mixes on the market, so I will talk about that a little bit. So let's have a look at the first method, of creating a cocktail mixtures consisting of annual crops. So the first thing you want to do is have the crop category listed. So here I'm talking about the different plant family types. So you have cereal, you have legume, you have brassica, and others, including forbs. So if you know the crop type, say oats, barley, you list that. And then if you know the variety you want to work with, this is really important because, if you are able to pinpoint the variety of barley or oats, they have different seed weights. So I'm talking about 1,000 kernel weight. So that will help you to achieve your target population. So again, what is important here is to know how many of these crop, how many of the seeds or the number of plants you want to be seeded for each of these crop types you have been able to identify. So say, for instance, for oats, if you want to have, say, about 375,000 of oats, on an acre basis, you write it down. And for barley, if you want, say, close to 600,000 seeds, you write it down. And say for forage peas, if your target is to have 192,000 seeds of forage peas, you write it down. And that will also mean, about 4.41 plants per square foot. So you also list that down. And so in the next column, we have been able to determine the number of seeds in a pound of each of these crops. So I will show you a table much later indicating the different, number of seeds per pound of the different crops that we have for cover crop cocktail mixtures. And so in the last column, this is where you calculate the pounds of seed that you actually need to seed for each of the crops that you have been able to identify, that you have been able to list in column 2. This is where we have crop type. So since you have indicated that your oats is going to be 375,000 seeds, so you write it down and now divide by the number of seeds in a pound of oats. So whatever you get is going to give you the pounds of seed that you need to seed for oats, to include in the cocktail mixture, for oats. And then same thing for barley. So this is 45 pounds that needs to be included in the cocktail mixture, with the oats. So again, you have hairy veg, which is 5. So in total, you have about 140 pounds of seed that needs to be used for this particular cocktail mixture per acre. And so this is a table that is showing, the different crop categories, crop types, and then of course, number of seeds, in a pound of seed that you have been able to identify. So say oats, it's 15,000 seeds. Then say hairy veg is about 12,000 seeds, in a pound. And then these are the suggested seeding rates in terms of, number of seeds per square foot. Yeah, so the second method, is by percent of normal monoculture seeding rate. Again, similar to the first one, you list the crop type or the plant families. Then if you know the varieties that you intend to seed for the different crop types, you list them. For instance, for millet, we have proso millet. For barley, we have been able to identify, say, Maverick barley variety, for instance. So you list those. And then these are the suggested, monocrop seeding rate for the different crops that you'll be using. Then the next column is where you indicate, the percent of the crop that you intend to use in the cocktail mixture. So for cereal, particularly for proso millet, we did indicate here that we use 5.5%. And for barley, where we're going to be using Maverick barley, we have indicated here that, the percent barley that will be included in this cocktail mixture is 40%. And so in the last column, so this is what you do. Since you have been able to identify the monoculture seeding rate, you divide that by the percent of this individual crops that you intend to include in your cocktail mixture. So for instance, for the red proso millet, since the seeding rate is 25 pounds per acre, then you divide that by 5.5%, which is what we like to include in this particular cocktail mixture. And then for this, the total pounds per acre is about 80 pounds. And of course, when you add all this up, the column that is written in red, you have 100%. So this is another method. So this is also called an equal amounts. So This is what I use mostly for producers. For this particular, method, is similar to the first two ones. You list the crop category or plant families. Then if you're able to identify the different types of crops that you want to use, you list them. And then, of course, if you know the varieties, you also list them. And then just like in the previous slides, you list the monocrop seeding rate for each crop. For proso millet is 25. For maverick barley, that's 108 pounds per acre. And then for common dairy veg, that's 20 pounds per acre. So, and then last column, what you need to do is divide each of these seeding rates by the total number of crops that you have listed for this particular cover crop mixture. So in this case, we have 6. So we have proso millet, we have maverick barley, we have dairy veg, we have pincy clover, we have forage peas, and forage brassicas. So you divide each of these crop seeding rates by the total number of seeds that you have in the listed here for this particular cover crop mixture. And that is why we call this equal amounts method. So the total amount you have here is going to be about 56 pounds per acre. Now, if you look at this 56, this is lower than the previous slides, and this is still the same cover crops listed. So this is what I do. If I want to create a cover crop cocktail mixture using this particular method, so it will normally increase the seeding rate of each of these crops by up to 25%. And if I'm also suggesting to our producer to use this method, I will recommend that they increase the seeding rate of each of this method by up to 25% before they divide by the total number of crops in this, the total number of crops that they'll be using for their own particular cocktail mixture. So doing that will increase the seeding rate, close to what we have here. I just like using this because you can easily list the crops, the seeding rates, and then of course just divide, by the number, by the total number of crops in your cocktail mixtures. Yeah, so there are several, cocktail mixtures on the market. So I always advise producers that if they are using these types of mixtures, they should make sure that whatever crops is being listed on the bag, will actually germinate and then establish in their area. So producers can replace those ones that will not do well that they have been able to identify, listed on the bags, by replacing such with a cereal, or even legume, that can replace the variety that wouldn't do well for them. For instance, if forage sorghum is listed on the bag, so I advise that, yeah, you can replace the forage sorghum, with say oats or barley, or even something that can provide a similar service that you're looking for. So it's very important to follow, the seeding instructions on these labels, on the labels that the companies have provided. At times they tell you to add oats, to add barley, to add forage peas. It's very important to follow all those recommendations, and then again go with whatever seeding rates that have been suggested. The reason is some of these cover crops that are available on the market, are brassica based. And if you don't follow what is being recommended in terms of you having to add oats or barley or forage peas, you stand the risk of, high nitrate feeds, and that's not really going to be good for the cows. Then it's also important that you ask questions, particularly, you want to know about the percentage germination, and if possible, the date that was tested. Ask questions as to the crop adaptation, particularly to the peas on those crops that have been listed on the commercial blends. And if you have any doubt, you can always contact us, to confirm the different crop adaptation. We have been testing some of these crops, since 2014. So we have lots of good information as to which crops we do well for us in the peas and which ones we wouldn't actually recommend. Proper seeding rates, for coated seeds is required. Like I said earlier, for the perennial forage mixes, if the seeds are coated, it's always better to increase the seeding rate by as much as even up to 25 or 30%. Then if the seeds have been inoculated, fine. If not, look for the appropriate inoculants for some of the legumes in the cocktail blend. Yeah, so for us for us here, we have been able to use 3/4 of an inch, for seeding intercropping and cocktail mixtures, particularly with forage peas. And, we've had great success with this. So for producers who may be thinking about using traditional peas, which are normally bigger than forage peas, yeah, so you can go up to 1 inch, of seeding depth. And so measurements for seeding depth you always be taken, after the press or packing wheels are passed over the seed. So this is a list of different crops and when it is advisable that you harvest such crops for grain feed or for silage. For barley, we advise that, when barley is at the subdough stage, this is when you should harvest for grain feed or silage, and for oats between the early and then late milk stage, and for wheat or soft white wheat is from the milk to subdough stage. For forage, of course, this is going to be in the following year after the forage is been seeded, say, for instance, in the fall or in the spring, of the previous year. The best stage to harvest such, for grain feed or silage is at the boot to heading stage. And for triticale, for spring triticale in particular, the harvesting stage is late milk for silage. And if the intention is to sward graze the triticale for sward grazing, soft or middle stage, it's always better. And in a situation where you have a pea and cereal mixture, say you have oats and forage peas, we always advise that whatever is recommended for the cereal, for the grain feed or silage, that's what you should go with when it comes to harvesting pea cereal mixture. So for instance, if we have say Maverick barley and 40-10 forage peas, if you want to harvest such for grain feed or silage, it's better to go with a soft dough stage. And when it comes to cover crop cocktails, where you have 4 or more crops, so it's always advisable, to go, with a moisture content for silage is 60 to 65%. And in a situation where you're thinking of a baleage, it's between 45 to 55. 50 to 55 is also good. So this will give you, a very good fermentation when the forage is being wrapped. Yeah, so here we just quickly talk about a few seeding techniques for intercropping as well as cocktail mixtures. So in a situation where you have all the seeds being pre-mixed before seeding, so they can be seeded together in a mixed or same row seeding, so that is easy. Like I said earlier, for us, we have always had a good success, with 3/4 of an inch. And this is because, we use forage peas. If you are using the traditional peas, yeah, you can increase your seeding depth to up to 1 inch. And then you can also seed, your cocktails or intercropping in alternate rows. This one is showing corn being intercropped with forage peas and in alternate rows. And then the picture just below it is a cocktail being intercropped with corn in alternate rows. You can see here where you have the soybeans. So that's the row for the cocktail. Then you can have a relay seeding. So in a situation where you've had your forage seeded, say in the previous spring or late fall, the following year, just before the fora is combined, you can have another, crop coming in, as a relay crop, possibly for fall grazing. Yeah, so you can also have a strip intercropping system. So in this, oh, sorry. So in this situation, what you need to do is to make sure that you use the width, the width of the seeder, to achieve the width of each crop in your strips. So normally you just go with the width of the seeder. So and then each strip will be wide enough, to kind of permit independent cultivation. So because you'll be seeding them, separately. So for instance, in this diagram, in this picture, you have a pea coming in first, and then followed by a strip of barley. And so this is what you want to do. If the seeding direction is in this way, then say you want to harvest for silage or green feed, or even for sward grazing, you can see where my arrow is pointing, so your harvesting direction is going to be in this way. And this will help you to create a good forage mix, particularly for silage or green feed. Yeah, so I'm going to briefly take you through a few of the results that we have from some of our trials. Now, this slide here is showing, perennial grasses that we established in 2016, in High Perry. So in the last 3 years, you can see this orchard grass here, this tall fescue and timothy have actually been able to give us better, they've been able to give better forage yields than these other grasses. In 2020, look at what we got from orchard grass, 1,700, and compared to what we got in 2021, actually just slightly higher. And we all know that last year was very dry and hot for us. And surprisingly, these 3 top grasses were still able to kind of compare very well with the yields that we got in 2020. So, I'm talking about orchard grass, tall fescue, and gray-starred timothy. So these are good forage grasses if one is thinking about including, grasses in forage mixtures with alfalfa or sainfoin or sasan milk veg. So again, looking at 15 straight legumes, also in High Perry, established in June 2016. Surprisingly, all the forage legumes have been able to yield more than 3,000 pounds per acre, even after about 6 years of establishment. I mean, when you compare this to what we have, for the grasses, this is far, more for the legumes than the grasses. So very impressive. Like I said, last year was very dry and hot for us, but in particular, PB Ultima Alfalfa was still able to give us, 5,000 pounds of forage dry matter yield per acre. So for producers whose bale weigh, about 1,500 pounds, that's about 3.4 bales per acre. Very impressive in a dry year that we got last year. Yeah, so looking at grasses and legume mixtures. So we had a total of 9 grass and legume mixtures, 3 different grasses, mixed with 3 different legumes. So the grasses, we use a hybrid brome grass called AC Nose. Then we also use another hybrid brome grass called Success. And then we use a fleet meadow brome grass, and we mix each of these with a spreader alfalfa, yellowhead alfalfa, and AC Mountain View sainfoin. Impressively, the fleet meadow brome actually did well with the different alfalfa varieties. The only exception was where we had AC Mountain View coming in, and that's where the mixture was not able to give as much yield as the 2 other mixtures, with fleet meadow brome. So you can see here is a 3,800, and this one is about 4,000. So really impressive, for the type of year that we had. So again, for producers whose bales, weigh about 1,500 pounds per bale, we're talking about close to 3 bales per acre in a very dry year, where in a situation where you have fleet meadow brome grass, mixed with spreader alfalfa. Yeah, so this is an ongoing trial that we established in 2020 in collaboration with the University of Alberta. This is a graduate students project. So this is this data I'm going to share with you is just the first year of production following establishment. Yeah, so I'll just briefly just talk to you about the yield. The highest yield we got from these particular mixtures, we've got a total of 15 mixtures. 13 of them include both grasses and legumes, at different seeding rates, from simple to complex. So simple, I'm talking about just 2 forages, a grass and a legume, and complex, I'm talking about 10 different varieties mixed together. So in this particular graph, you can see mixture 14, which is a 3-way legume mix containing 55% mountain dew, along with 25% sisa milk veg and 20% of spreader for alfalfa. It's been able to give a higher yield than most of the other mixtures here, and actually higher than the 3 grasses that we use as control. And then the 3 grasses are this one here, the Ceylon Master, and then we've got 5 grasses mixed together, this which consists of 1 hybrid brown grass, 2 wheat grasses, 2 other grasses as well. And then we have 5 grasses, which consist of fleet meadow brome, 2 hybrid brome grasses, and 2 types of wheat grasses. So looking at the forage yield, this 3-way legume mix and then 3-way grass legume mix, as well as 6-way grass legume mix, have been able to give us much higher forage yields, the year following establishment of the different forage species or forage mixtures. Yeah, so we have been able to look at different ways of introducing pasture, perennial legumes into an old pasture, pasture that are not very productive, compared to, several years ago when they were established. So these are the top, methods that have, shown promise, for us. And the first one is a situation where you have a high stock density grazing. We use about 360,000 of yearlings, per acre, for a very short time, to graze, this treatment, and then followed by direct seeding of a mixture of legume consisting of alfalfa, birdsfoot, trefoil, sainfoin, and sisal milk veg. And so that has given us a very good result. And as you can see here, the picture in the middle, so that is the result we got from that. So the picture you see there is a sainfoin. The field had no sainfoin before we, implemented this treatment. No birdsfoot trefoil and no sisal milk veg at all. Very few stands of alfalfa, but we have been able to successfully, introduce these different legumes, into depleted pasture using these different methods. So the second method is direct seeding of a legume pasture seed. Again, the same mixture that we had in treatment 1. And the only difference here is we just follow the producer's normal grazing practice. Tell us when you're done grazing that field, and then we'll come in to seed whatever we need to seed. And then the third method is where you have to break and reseed. We did something different here. We seeded a mixture of winter cereal plus perennial legumes, same as in treatment 1 and 2. So I'm talking about sainfoin, birdsfoot, trefoil, sisal milk veg, and alfalfa. And that is the picture that you see, on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can see the winter cereals, and then you can see the sainfoin coming in. So very impressive. Yeah, so this is just taking you through briefly, some of the findings from our cover crop cocktail mixtures that we did for 2 years. Yeah, so we did look at 7 cover crop cocktail mixtures, consisting of 2 crops up to 8 crops. And then we compared those to monoculture barley called Maverick. We use Maverick variety, and then also compare that to monoculture oats. We use haymaker oats. You can see species, 5 species mixture and 6 species mixtures are actually we're able to give us more forage yield than most of the other ones. There's a lot of similarity in the forage yield for those two with some of the species mixtures. For instance, wherever you see C, so that means they are similar in terms of forage yield. But the 5 species and 6 species were still able to give higher forage yields, much higher than Maverick barley. Not so much over haymaker oats, and that's why I like to promote haymaker oats to producers. For us, it's really been impressive in terms of quality, in terms of production, and it's because it's able to do well even under a drier situation. Yeah, so this is looking at the crude protein content of the same set of cover crop cocktails that we tested for 2 years. So when you look at the 7 and 8 species, mixes, 7 has got oats, millet, hairy veg, forage peas, winfred, and vivian forage, brassica, and phacelia. And then we have 8, next to 7 with all these different crops. Those 2 have been able to give us, an impressive crude protein content, far better than what we have been able to get from barley and oats. And the surprising thing here is that, when you look at 7 and 8, the more cocktails you have, it's like we're getting a better feed quality, particularly when you're looking at the protein content. Yeah, one may say, well, 5 and 6, tend to be lower, in forage protein. But when you look at the differences, the gaps between this and the other ones, and it's impressive. So wherever you have a dot between this, that's the average yield. And you can see the difference between the average yield of these 7 species and 8 species compared to the other ones. Very impressive. And so again, the same set of cocktail cover crop mixtures that we looked at for 2 years, comparing 7 different types to monoculture barley and oat. The 5 and 6 species mixtures, have been able to give, slightly better energy than the other ones. Overall, the energy for all the cocktails and the monoculture, crops, were not bad. We have here 65 to 67%. So that's impressive. That's impressive. But there's there's a pattern. There's a trend here. Wherever we had 2 cool season crops, particularly oat and barley coming in, it's like there's a tendency, for us to have a better energy content than those other ones that just had, 1 cool season crop and 1 cool season cereal crops in the mixtures. And of course, when you look at the 5 and 6, that's really close to what we had for the monoculture oats. Again, here we use haymaker oats, and that is the reason why I promote haymaker oats to producers. Very good in terms of biomass yield, very good in terms of protein. One will not expect oat varieties, with the exception of SO1 oat or NASA oat, to be able to give good quality feed like, as haymaker oats. But surprisingly, for us here, it's been really impressive. We've been able to get good results from haymaker oats compared to, Maverick barley or some of the other forage types of cereals that we have. Of course, with the exception of, awesome soft white with Kelly. I wouldn't be talking much about that, but it's something, we have a lot of information on as well. Yeah, so I think I'm done. My throat is dry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Akim. That was a lot of information in a short period of time.
So any questions, Joanna and Katie?
Yeah, we got a couple
Okay.
going on.
You betcha. Would you like to ask Johanna or would you like me?
You do the first one. I'll scroll up and we'll alternate maybe a little.
Okay, because I do have a list here. So,
Oh, perfect.
okay, so on the topic, Akim, of perennial forage establishment, do you have any experience with no-tilling in new perennials?
No tilling in new perennials.
So like for seed bed prep, like you're not doing any prep, you're just drilling right in.
Yeah, on a field scale, not. Well, we don't, we only have experience seeding a small plot, but it's going to be important for you to prepare the seed bed very well. You want to make sure that the seed is firm, make sure that it's firm. And then when you seed, packing is really important. You want to make sure that, you have a good packer, on your drill that's going to press the what do you call it, the seeding rows, well. So good land preparation, like I said earlier, it's very important to plan ahead, not just 1 year. At times you may want to plan 2 years. If you need to spray, an existing vegetation, particularly where you have perennial forages growing for a few years, you may want to spray before you have a hard frost in the fall so that you can have a good kill. And, even the rate of Roundup would depend, on whatever you have in the existing field. So the first kill may require higher rates of Roundup. So yeah, so plan ahead, do, spray in the fall. Now, if you have to, you can also work in the fall, work the land in the fall so that you have a very good land, ready for you to seed in the spring.
Awesome, thank you. A question about coated seed. Do you know what the material in the seed coat is, and what's the justification for coating seed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's why I ask producers to ask questions. Yeah, at times they coat the seeds, with chemicals that will, treat the seeds to prevent, insects, soil-borne insects from eating up the seeds, the germinated seed. At times they coat the seed with inoculants, So it's always good to know if the seed is being coated with a seed treatment. At times when the seed is really small, they coat the seed to increase the seed size. So, in a situation where you have a tiny seed and then what you get is a big seed, you see, so you actually, not paying for you're paying more for what you have in the bag. So it's like you're probably paying, just for half a bag in such a situation. So, yeah, and that's why I said, ask questions. I know the 3 seeds in order to increase the seed size, the 3 seeds in order to take care, of, diseases, and then pests, and then they also treat seeds, with, rhizobia inoculant. So always ask questions. And in a situation where the seed is being treated, like I said earlier, increase the seeding rate, up to 20%. And if you know the types of seed in the bag, I'll give you an example. Purple, I think it's purple berry clover, very good. It's a very tiny seed, but if you're able to get some of this seed from the seed company, you'll be surprised by the seed size you get. That means the seed is being treated or coated, by even more than 300%. Same thing with, I can't remember the name, so tiny, but at the end of the day, what you get is very big. So ask questions, ask them what is being used in coating the seeds. And if you know that most of the seeds are tiny seeds, then you want to increase the seeding rate by even up to 30%.
Awesome, thank you, Akim. Another question regarding perennial legumes. How much nitrogen would a legume mix leave in the soil if you terminated it after 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I may not be able to give you a straight answer on this. For perennial, when after terminating a perennial legume, or a mixture filled with mixtures of perennial legumes, there's what we call estimated nitrogen release, which is nitrogen that's going to be released over time, particularly on the on a growing season basis based on bacterial activity. So we have been able to find out that where you have alfalfa and legume mixtures, even though after your soil test, if your soil test indicates a low soil nitrogen, be rest assured that over the next few years, there's going to be you're going to be seeing a buildup of nitrogen, coming up in your soil that will be available because of all these different bacterial activity that will be making the nitrogen available, to your soil and the subsequent crops. So I will not be able to give you, a definite answer here. I just know that, in a situation where you have been able to terminate your alfalfa, for us, we don't always want to do any nitrogen trial or nitrogen fertilizer trial, in soil just because of this, the recurring, cumulative effects of nitrogen over the next 2 or 3 or even more years after the legumes is being terminated. So that's what they call estimated nitrogen release and potential nitrogen mineralization, which will make nitrogen available, over the next few years. And again, look at the soil organic matter of the soil. After you have been able to terminate, do a soil test. If you're getting a higher soil organic matter, that's an indication that you have nitrogen tied into the soil in organic form, which will be released in potential nitrogen mineralization form or the estimated nitrogen release that I've talked about.
Wonderful. Okay, I got one more perennial forage question for you before we switch gears to cocktails. Do you have any experience using native forage varieties mixed into tame forage varieties?
No, that's a straight answer. No, I've tried to establish purple berry clover. We didn't have any success doing that by itself as a monoculture.
Okay. All righty. So cocktails. When you were talking about cocktail seeding rates, Akim, do your seeding rates account for germination rates already, or has seed germination already been accounted for?
Yeah, we do seed germination, and we ask the companies, the different companies, for seed germination. So we do our calculation to take care of the shortfall in seed germination. Wherever we have less than 90% or 95, we want to adjust our seeding rate to take care of the shortfall in the seed germination. So again, this is what I tell producers. If you're not sure about the different this germination for the different crops you have in your cocktails, you want to take into account the mortality of those seeds. You want to take into account if the seed is been coated. You want to take into account the unavailability of the germination percentage for each crop. So it can be good for you to increase the seeding rate by as much as even 15% in a situation where you're not able to take care of or know much about the seeding germination for each crop in the mixes.
Wonderful. Okay, so when you were talking about some research results for the various cocktail mixes, you noted that the 7- and 8-way cocktails were less in energy. Was this because they were higher in protein? Could you touch a bit more on that, Akim?
Okay, the 7 and 8 were lower in what?
They were lower in energy. but higher in protein. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, the reason for that, I think, let me just go back to the slides. Yeah, so the reason for that, yeah, in 1 year, like I said, this is an average of 2 years. So in one of the years, we missed harvesting at the right stage. And so we compromised on the feed quality because and again, that's the first reason. And again, say 7 and 8, they don't have the 2 cool season crops. They both had one oats and proso millet, and then other crops coming in. Like if you see, let me show you the previous slide again. Yeah, so if you see, actually even annual grass. So if you see the 8 species mixture, doesn't have the oats and barley. Instead of the barley, we had annual ryegrass. And then one of the years we harvested a bit late, so we didn't get the good quality that you will normally get, I think, in annual grasses. You get a very good quality, grass from quality feed from annual grasses if you harvest, early than when we harvested in this prior. So both 7 and 8 didn't have the barley and oats that we had in some of the mixes, and that's one of the reasons I think why we had a low TDN. And again, we didn't fertilize these cocktails, so the cereals, kind of, took more of the soil nitrogen, from the soil than where, we, just what do you call it, just one crop, monocrop.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that is able to answer, if you want, you can, whoever asks question can do a follow-up. I can, have a think over it and then get back to you properly.
Yeah, no, I think that was a pretty good answer, Akim. What are your thoughts, Akim, about seeding tame buckwheat after silaging for late season grazing or for weed control?
So after silaging.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
so you
so
silage a crop and then go in and seed buckwheat.
that is gonna be fantastic. We've not done it, but I think that's gonna be great. Buckwheat as a fast-growing crop, and that's why it's been recommended for controlling, for smoothing out weeds. We actually have a recent journal publication where we looked at 10 different crops consisting of forage brassicas and forbs, and buckwheat was able to give us, on the average, 10,000 pounds of forage dry matter yield, over 2 years, using an average of 2 years. So very impressive, very good crop. So if you seed after silaging, my guess is because it's able to grow very fast, so you should still be able to get a very good growth before the hard frost.
Wonderful. Okay, a bit of a situational question here for you. What is your favorite grass and cereal to include in a mix for dairy specifically? This person has to avoid oats in any substantial quality because they have grizzly bears in the area. So do you have a recommendation for them, Akim?
Yeah, Festuloleum. The only sad thing about Festuloleum is that, the lifespan is only from 2 to 4 years. But if you're thinking about something for dairy production, I can guarantee you Festuloleum, is good. Annual Italian ryegrass is also good, but again, short lifespan. Then if you are thinking about on an annual basis, is this question for an annual basis or perennials? If you're thinking of an annual basis, soft white wheat or spring triticale, but before they head out, you're gonna get a very good quality feed for silage.
Okay. Yeah, they just put in the chat here, mostly a perennial situation they're looking at.
Okay, yeah. So for perennials, yeah, unfortunately, Cressulatum doesn't last for more than 4 years, but that's gonna be my number one.
Okay. If I add birdsfoot, trefoil, and sainfoin to my pastures, will it overwinter and persist? And what can I do to help them thrive?
Yeah, they will overwinter and persist. The problem with sainfoin is that, well, particularly with the older varieties wouldn't compete well with alfalfa in alfalfa mixtures. But the Glenview and the Mountain View varieties have been able to do much better than the Nova and Melrose, that we, used to, several years ago. So the problem is not much of a persistency, but getting the sisal milk veg to establish well, after seeding. But the good thing about the newer variety that is available called AC Belt is that is easier to establish than the Windsor, the Osley 1 and 2. And like I said in my presentation, we've always had good luck establishing all these different legumes. And you can see in some of the slides, good plots of sisal milk veg and the sainfoin. So they will overwinter, but the sainfoin may not last as for more than probably, again, it depends on your management. If you're able to manage well, yeah, you can have several years of the sainfoin in the field. Sisal milk veg, it may take some time, but once it establishes, I can tell you that can last for several years.
Okay. Perfect. Reminder, if you have any questions for Akim, please pop them in the chat. I have one more question here for you, Akim, at this time. And it is, I seeded perennial rye in my mix last year, but I don't really like it. My plan is to beat it up with rabbit hutches on them for a week without any time to rest. Will this terminate the perennial rye?
To terminate with what? I didn't get that part.
Perennial rye, so he's wanting to put rabbit hutches on it just to beat it up really bad without a break. Will that terminate it?
Perennial rye. Yeah, that one is hard for me. Yeah, it's yeah, that one is really hard. So the producer is talking about 1 year after establishment.
Yes, that it went yellow and didn't grow well, so he wants to terminate it.
Okay. Yeah, I can do some findings and then get back to, I can do some readings and talk to a few, specialists here and there, and then get back to, do we have the information or the person can just get in touch with us? And then
Yeah, you betcha. I do have this fellow's email, so
okay,
I'll pass that along to you, Akim.
Okay, thanks.
Alrighty. So at this time, once again, if you have any more questions for Akim, please pop them in the chat. At this time, if you would like to come off of mute and ask Akim a question yourself, you're more than welcome as well.
While we wait here, Akim, you've talked a bit about all of this different stuff with seeding rates and that sort of thing. Can you talk very briefly about nurse crops for perennials, for getting perennials established?
You're talking about the methods, or?
Yeah, like seeding a nurse crop with perennials.
Okay. Yeah, it's similar to using a companion crop, yeah, so using a companion crop, an annual crop, yeah, so yeah, it's really similar. It depends on the type of perennials that you're talking about. Most of them will stand up very well, yeah, so yeah, most of them would stand up very well. For annuals, where you have airy veg, or you have more of a creeping type, a nurse crop may be a better fit. But for perennials, most of them will actually stand up very well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, but again, similar to what do you call it, what I said about using, using a companion crop. Yeah,
Okay.
like, yeah, except if you're thinking about using a hairy veg as a perennial, which will always last for 2 years, so using a nurse crop, yeah, a similar something, lower seeding rate for the nurse crop, you want to just make sure that, they don't fall, they don't lodge much, so
Mhm.
yeah, the amount of the nurse crop, doesn't have to be high, less than 50% of whatever should be recommended, it's good. And then, yeah, it's hard for me because most of the perennials will stand up very well. But when you talk about annuals, we have a 40-10 forage peas, which lodges heavily. You have some of these newer varieties of forage pea, they lodge, but not as much as 40-10. So using a nurse crop, will actually help them, stand up very well.
Okay. We had another question. When you're seeding by mob grazing, so you're broadcasting the seed and then grazing afterwards, do brassicas and brassicas, or grasses and brassicas catch well, or what's the situation there? Does it work? Does it not work?
Yeah, from my experience, we've done that, but not so much with the annual crops. We've done that with perennials. So the alfalfa and then the alfalfa and sasa milk veg, the alfalfa in particular was able to catch, far better than the sasa milk veg, and both the legumes in the mixture, caught far more than the grasses that we had. So I think in the third year, we were able to see some of those grasses coming up, but not so much in the year, following, in the year that we implemented the treatment. So my guess is maybe the grasses didn't have a good seed to soil contact for some reason, but later on, came up as a result of, a buildup of those grasses in the soil as a seed bank.
Awesome. I saw Monty came off of mute there for a minute, but he might be.
And I see Adam and Goats, friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to actually, I like to hear from you because I know you've always asked questions, in the previous sessions.
Hi, Akim. So I have an existing mostly perennial forage pasture for my goats, and I don't want to destroy what I already have. I would just like to add certain things to it now that I have a little more experience and knowledge. And so my thought was to broadcast seed and then cover it with composted manure and wood shavings and stuff like that, peat moss, whatever. I'm top dressing anyway, and so that gets the soil contact, right? And so I think that would work pretty good. Did you cover that in your presentation? I didn't hear that as an option.
Yeah, I didn't cover that, but we know in a few of our on-farm field scale trials, we did look at that, where we seeded, a mixture of grasses and legumes, through broadcasting method. The alfalfa was able to catch very well, and in this situation, you're thinking about covering, spreading the compost, with some wood shavings. So, my guess is you'll still be able to see a good germination, not 100%. So, you may want to invest a little bit more on, seeding more, increasing the seeding rates. Like, if your plan is say maybe about 14 pounds per acre of the mixture of the perennials, you want to increase that to maybe about 18, 20, and then you follow that with whatever, compost or wood shavings. Yeah. So we've been able to, broadcast seeds. We did that actually in the spring and in the fall, and then we had some good success, particularly for legume and for alfalfa in the mixtures, and very great, good pictures to show, what we got. Again, you may want to, if it's possible for you to disturb the soil, whatever harrow, whatever form of disturbance you have, before you cover the with the compost, or even after covering the compost. But I'll prefer a situation where you disturb the soil before you even put the compost.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any more questions for Akim?
Thanks, guys. I hope you have a safe drive back, from the Zoom meeting.
Right on. Well, going once, going twice.
Alrighty. Well, people have got our, oh, there's
Oh,
Lynn.
okay, there's Linda. Okay, yeah.
Oh, we can't hear you though.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we got you.
I keep forgetting that my headphones don't automatically have my microphone on them. Anyways, I came in a little bit late, so maybe you said it, but I was looking at the second method of creating your cocktail mix, and it was by percentage, and you're like 5% of this and 40% of that. How do you decide what percentage of your crop to choose? So like you've got 5.5% of the millet and 40% of the barley. How did you decide what percentage to be in the cocktail?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, so I like to go with cereal, say 40 to 50%. For instance, if you want 40%, minimum of 40% of the legumes, that's what I like to go with. And then forage brassicas, I make sure I don't exceed 20%. That is standard for me as well as standard for most scientists in the US. And so when you look at that, you're likely able to get about 1 or even 1.25 pound of forage brassica in your mix. So this is what I do. I just go with say 40%, 40 to 50% of the cereals, and then about 50% of the legumes. Then I can make up, the shortfall with forbs, forage brassicas, forbs. I'm talking about Phacelia. I'm talking about chicory. I'm talking about plantain. Then also talking about sunflower. So I like to make up whatever is short with those. Just make sure that my cereal and legumes, will be the bulk of whatever my composition is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, and then again, if a producer, approaches me, I ask, what do you want to have in the cocktails? What do you have ready on farm? Let me know what you have, and then what are you likely to go to the seed companies for? I like to do, and I like you to use what is available for you, in the area, so that you can save on cost. And so I like to know if it's a barley, if it's forage peas, and if you have those two, that's, probably bulk of what we need. And then I'll just come up with some other things that the producers may be interested in. It could be clovers, passing clovers, or even crimson clover, and then hairy veg or whatever.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. All right, I think we will call it there. Like Katie said, and if you've got any questions, feel free to send us an email or send us a message on the website. We love to answer questions and hear from people. So yeah, that's think we'll call it there. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. And thank you, Akim, for.
Thanks.
I just dropped a link in the chat, but if you're interested in learning more about our research programming, I did just drop a link in the chat on some of our research programming there. So be sure to check that out.
Awesome. All right. Have a good long weekend.